It was a bright, sunny afternoon in the quiet suburban neighborhood of Willow Creek. Rows of pristine houses lined the street, with perfectly trimmed lawns and colorful flower beds, giving the impression of calm and harmony. But beneath this serene exterior, tensions often simmered, especially when HOA Karen, the neighborhood's self-appointed ruler, was around. That day, Emily, a friendly neighbor, was walking back from the local grocery store carrying bags filled with fresh produce. Karen spotted her from across the street, arms crossed, eyebrows raised. "You're blocking the sidewalk. This is against HOA rules," Karen shouted, her voice sharp and commanding. Emily stopped, surprised by the sudden confrontation. Unsure if this minor issue would escalate. Other neighbors peeked out of their windows, sensing the brewing drama. Emily's husband, Mark, watched from their porch, worried, knowing Karen's reputation for exaggeration. Little did anyone know, the dispute over groceries was about to spiral far beyond petty HOA rules. Karen's next move would involve calling the cops, expecting fear and compliance, but the story was about to take a shocking, unexpected turn that no one could have predicted. Within minutes, the familiar wail of sirens echoed down the street, and 2 patrol cars rolled into the neighborhood. Karen, arms crossed triumphantly, waved at the approaching officers, convinced her authority would be enforced. Emily took a deep breath, trying to remain calm, her grocery bags in hand. The officers stepped out, professional but neutral, expecting a standard HOA complaint. "Ma'am, we received a call regarding a dispute with the HOA," one officer began, addressing Emily. Karen interjected immediately, pointing a finger at Emily. "She refuses to follow our neighborhood regulations. She's obstructing the sidewalk." The officers nodded politely, scanning the scene. Emily, however, didn't panic. She knew how to handle authority. She explained calmly that she had the right to use the sidewalk, and that there was no violation occurring. Karen's confident smirk began to falter as the officers listened, her version of events slowly losing credibility. The tension in the sunny suburban street grew, and neighbors watched closely, curious about how the confrontation would unfold. Something in Emily's demeanor suggested that this dispute would not end the way Karen expected. As the officers began to jot notes, the neighborhood held its breath. Emily set her grocery bags down gently and looked each officer in the eye. "I understand your duty, officers," she said, voice calm yet commanding. "But you should know, I am fully authorized to oversee this street as part of my official capacity." She reached into her bag, pulling out a polished police badge, glinting in the afternoon sun. The officers froze. Karen's jaw dropped, eyes widening in disbelief. "Official badge?" the lead officer asked, astonished. Emily nodded, steady and composed. "Yes. I am the commanding officer for this precinct. You may verify my credentials if necessary." Murmurs spread across the street as neighbors began to realize the gravity of the situation. Karen, once confident and commanding, suddenly seemed tiny and powerless. Her arms dropped to her sides, and her usual dominance evaporated. The officers now looked at Emily with respect, nodding subtly. What had begun as a petty grocery dispute had transformed into a confrontation with real authority, one that Karen had no idea how to face. Karen's expression wavered as she tried to regain composure. She opened her mouth, attempting to assert control, but no words came. Emily remained calm, smiling politely, letting the officers handle the situation. "There is no violation," she said gently, "and I assure you, this matter is resolved." The lead officer stepped forward, glancing at Karen. "Ma'am, this is unnecessary," he said, voice firm but professional. The other officer nodded, confirming that the complaint was baseless. Karen's face turned red as she realized she had been completely outmatched. Across the street, neighbors peeked out their windows, some whispering, some quietly cheering. Jason, Emily's husband, finally breathed a sigh of relief. Watching his wife handle the confrontation with poise and authority. The sunny street, which moments ago had been tense and charged, now held a quiet respect for Emily. She had defused the situation without a single harsh word, relying solely on her composure and the undeniable power of her position. The officers carefully explained to Karen that her complaint was unfounded and politely advised her to avoid future unnecessary calls. Karen, usually assertive and domineering, now stood frozen, clutching her HOA handbook uselessly. Emily picked up her grocery bags calmly and nodded politely to the officers, who saluted her subtly in acknowledgement of her authority. The neighborhood, still watching, began to murmur in admiration. Karen slunk back into her house, her control utterly broken. Emily returned to her porch, smiling faintly at Jason, who could hardly contain his pride. In a matter of minutes, the grocery dispute had transformed into a lesson in humility and respect. The suburban street, once ruled by HOA intimidation, now understood that authority comes from preparation, professionalism, and composure, not self-appointed power. The quiet victory was profound, teaching the neighbors a subtle but unforgettable lesson: respect is earned, and sometimes it comes from the most unexpected source. In the days that followed, the neighborhood's dynamics subtly shifted. Karen avoided Emily whenever possible, no longer attempting to assert dominance or intimidate others. Security patrols and HOA officers treated Emily with politeness and professionalism, fully aware of her position. Neighbors nodded quietly as she passed, some whispering about the day she faced confrontation with poise and authority. Jason noticed these subtle changes and realized that Emily had not just resolved a minor dispute, she had reshaped the entire neighborhood's perception of power and respect. The once overbearing HOA presence had been neutralized without aggression, leaving only a quiet acknowledgement of Emily's authority. It was a lesson in calm strength, preparation, and dignity, all demonstrated during what had begun as a trivial grocery disagreement. Respect, Emily knew, could never be demanded, it had to be shown and earned. Weeks later, life on Willow Creek returned to its normal rhythm, but the story of Emily's confrontation became quietly legendary. Karen no longer attempted to control her neighbors, her authority diminished entirely. HOA officers who had previously been overbearing now treated Emily with subtle deference. Jason and Emily enjoyed peaceful days, walking their dogs or tending to their garden, knowing the neighborhood now regarded them differently. Emily had shown that calm composure, preparation, and rightful authority could transform tension into respect. And that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you loved the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.